The massive crystalline chambers of the Galactic Council stretched endlessly upward, their walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that cast dancing shadows across the assembly. 47 different species had gathered in response to the most urgent distress call in galactic history. The air itself seemed thick with fear and desperation as translation matrices hummed, converting dozens of alien languages into comprehensible speech. Admiral Kale of the Zephyrian fleet dominated the center platform, his insectoid frame towering, 8 feet tall. His 4 multifaceted eyes swept across the assembly like searchlights, each one reflecting the holographic horror displayed above them. His clawed fingers, each tipped with natural bone weapons, drummed an anxious rhythm against the obsidian council table that had witnessed 1,000 years of galactic diplomacy. "The Helios system is gone," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of 3 billion deaths. The translation matrices converted his clicking mandibles into words that chilled every species present. Not conquered, not occupied, gone, consumed entirely by the void swarm. The holographic display above the assembly showed the mechanical nightmare that had emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies. Thousands of vessels that resembled twisted metal spiders moved through space with terrifying coordination. Each ship was the size of a city, bristling with conversion appendages that could strip entire planets down to their core elements. The swarm didn't just destroy, it consumed, converting everything it touched into more of itself. General Vex of the Brutarian Empire rose from his reinforced platform, his massive 12-foot frame making even Admiral Kale look small. His species had evolved from apex predators, and his natural armor plating gleamed under the chamber's lights. "The Andromedian defense fleet threw everything they had at this swarm," he growled, his voice like grinding stone. 1,000 ships. The best weapons in the galaxy. They lasted 4 hours before complete conversion. Murmurs of terror rippled through the assembly. The Andromedians had possessed the most advanced military technology known to galactic civilization. If they had fallen so quickly, what hope did anyone else have? The ethereal representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, spoke in harmonics that made nearby species feel dizzy. "Our quantum analysts calculate the swarm's growth rate at exponential levels. Every ship they convert doubles their combat effectiveness. Our mystic seers have glimpsed the swarm's path," added the draconian ambassador, her serpentine form coiled around a levitation platform. They moved toward the galactic core, toward the heart of all civilization. In the midst of this chaos, Ambassador Lee Hana of the recently inducted Terran Federation stood quietly at her modest platform. Unlike the elaborate ceremonial armor, energy fields, and biological displays of other species, she wore a simple black uniform with minimal insignia. Her human form looked almost fragile compared to the towering aliens around her, but her dark eyes held a steady confidence that seemed out of place given the circumstances. "The Earth Federation pledges its full support to this alliance," she said quietly, her voice somehow carrying clearly through the massive chamber despite the lack of amplification. The crystalline hegemony's representative, a being of living diamond whose faceted body caught and scattered light in rainbow patterns, chimed like wind bells. "The humans are brave, but this threat requires fleets, not courage. How many vessels can your species contribute?" All eyes turned to Ambassador Lee Hana. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft humming of life support systems and the distant pulse of the station's massive heart engine. She looked around the assembly, meeting the gaze of creatures that evolution had shaped into living weapons, beings of pure energy, and ancient races that had mastered technologies beyond human comprehension. "One ship," she said simply. The silence stretched for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then the chamber erupted. Admiral Kale's mandibles clicked rapidly in what his species used to express disbelief. One ship against a mechanical plague that consumed the combined might of the Andromedian armada. General Vex's laughter was like an avalanche. "The Brutarian Empire alone is committing 50 dreadnoughts. The Zephyrians have pledged their entire deep space fleet. One ship?" The ethereal being's energy form flickered with what might have been amusement. Perhaps the humans misunderstood the scale of this threat. Or perhaps, chimed the crystalline hegemony's representative in musical tones dripping with condescension, they should focus on support roles, supply runs, medical assistance, refugee transport. Leave the actual fighting to species with more substantial contributions. Ambassador Lee Hana listened to the mockery and derision with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the session. She waited for the laughter to die down, then spoke again with quiet certainty. One ship. We'll transmit the rendezvous coordinates within the hour. The alien representatives exchanged glances that needed no translation. The humans had clearly lost their minds, or perhaps their primitive understanding of warfare had failed them entirely. Either way, they would be little more than a footnote in the coming battle. But as Ambassador Lee Hana turned to leave the chamber, she paused and looked back at the assembly. Her smile was small, almost imperceptible, but somehow it made several of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy feel unexpectedly uneasy, though none of them could explain exactly why. The staging area around Proxima Way Station looked like the galaxy had turned itself inside out and shaken all its contents into one impossible location. Space itself seemed to bend under the weight of the massive armada that had assembled in response to the Void Swarm threat. Thousands of vessels from dozens of species created a metallic storm cloud that stretched across several astronomical units, each ship representing the pinnacle of their civilization's military might. Captain Yu Jinwoo stood on the bridge of his Altarian Defense Corps cruiser, watching the incredible display through reinforced viewports that automatically adjusted their opacity to prevent retinal damage from the countless engine flares. His ship, the Stellar Hawk, was considered a fast attack vessel by Altarian standards, but here it looked like a minnow swimming among whales. Status report on fleet positioning. He ordered his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kim Subin, who had been tracking the chaos for the past 6 hours. Sir, the Zephyrian Deep Space Fleet has taken formation Epsilon 7 on our starboard flank. 53 heavy cruisers and 12 dreadnoughts. Their flagship alone could probably glass a moon. Subin's fingers danced across her holographic displays, highlighting different sections of the armada. The Brutarian Empire brought their entire war machine, 87 ships, including those massive fortress-class vessels that look like flying cities. Through the viewports, Jinwoo could see the Brutarian ships in the distance, each one bristling with weapon emplacements and armor plating thick enough to withstand planetary bombardment. Their design philosophy was simple. If it moved, you shot it until it stopped moving, and if that didn't work, you shot it with something bigger. The crystalline hegemony's formation is interesting, Subin continued, pointing to a section of space that seemed to shimmer like a mirage. 37 ships, but they keep phase-shifting between dimensions. Our sensors can barely track them. And the Draconian fleet? Holding position at the formation's center with Admiral Kale's command ship. Commander Nex's vessel is that one. She indicated a sleek, predatory-looking ship that seemed to be carved from a single piece of black metal. 23 ships total, but each one packs enough firepower to level a small continent. The communications array crackled to life, and Commander Nex's voice filled the bridge. His draconian accent made everything sound like a threat, even casual conversation. Altarian vessel Stellar Hawk, still no sign of the human contribution. To our glorious armada. Perhaps they got lost on the way. Laughter echoed across multiple comm channels as other ship commanders joined the conversation. Captain Vorthak of the Ethereal Fleet chimed in, his voice distorted by quantum harmonics. Maybe they're still looking for that one ship they promised. Check the cargo holds, perhaps it's very small. Jinwoo felt heat rise in his cheeks. His own planet had been colonized by humans 3 generations ago, and while the Altarians had developed their own distinct culture, he still felt a connection to Earth. Unknown, Commander Nex. We're monitoring all approach vectors. The truth was more embarrassing than the jokes. Jinwoo had been in contact with the human representatives, and even they seemed confused about their military contribution. Commander Park Minji, aboard the aging destroyer Soul's Pride, was the only official human military presence at the staging area, and her ship looked like it belonged in a museum rather than a war zone. Lieutenant Kim, patch me through to the Souls. Pride, Jinwoo ordered. The connection established, and Commander Park Minji's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired, frustrated, and more than a little embarrassed. Her small bridge was cramped compared to the spacious command centers of the alien vessels, and her crew numbered only 37 people. "Captain Yu, good to see a familiar face," she said, managing a weak smile. "This is turning into quite the gathering." "Commander Park, any update on the primary human vessel?" The other fleet commanders are starting to ask pointed questions. Minji rubbed her temples. She'd been serving in the Earth fleet for 15 years, working her way up from communications officer to destroyer captain, and she'd never encountered anything like this situation. Still the same response from Terra Command. "The ship is en route. Maintain radio silence until arrival." That's it. No details, no timeline, no explanation. What kind of ship requires that level of secrecy? Jinwoo asked. "That's what I keep wondering. I've served on every class of vessel in the Earth fleet, from patrol boats to heavy cruisers. There's nothing in our inventory that should need this kind of classified treatment." She paused, looking around her small bridge. "Honestly, I'm starting to think the bureaucrats back home are panicking. They probably promised one ship to save face, and now they're scrambling to retrofit some old cargo hauler with missile pods." The Soul's Pride was exactly what she described, a leftover from Earth's early space defense days, when humanity was still figuring out how to build ships that could survive deep space combat. It was functional, reliable, and completely outclassed by everything else in the staging area. Admiral Kale's voice boomed across all communication channels, his translated words carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding fleets. "All vessel commanders, final tactical briefing commences in 1 hour. We have intelligence updates on void swarm movement patterns and new deployment strategies. Attendance is mandatory." "Copy that, Admiral," Minji responded, then switched to a private channel with Jinwoo. "Between you and me, Captain, I think we're about to proceed without whatever mystery ship Earth promised. My Soul's Pride and I will do our best. But we're not exactly going to tip the balance against a mechanical plague that ate the Andromedian fleet." Through the viewport, both commanders could see the final ships arriving and taking their positions. The ethereal phase ships flickered in and out of visible spectrum like ghosts, while massive orcish dreadnoughts lumber into formation with all the grace of flying asteroids. Each alien vessel represented technologies and capabilities that had been perfected over millennia of galactic warfare, and somewhere in that vast armada, one small human destroyer waited for reinforcements that might never come, her crew wondering if they were about to become the galaxy's shortest footnote in the history of interstellar warfare. The countdown to the final briefing continued, and still no sign of humanity's promised contribution appeared on any sensor. Array in the fleet. Space twisted like a piece of paper being crumpled by an invisible giant's hand. Commander Park Minji watched from the bridge of Soul's Pride, as reality itself seemed to bend and fold around a single point in space, creating ripples that made her stomach lurch and her instruments scream warnings. The distortion grew larger, pulsing with energy that her sensors couldn't identify or measure. "What in the seven hells is that?" Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun called out from his weapons station, his voice cracking with disbelief. The young officer had seen plenty of hyperspace exits during his 3 years of service, but nothing like this. Most ships emerge from faster-than-light travel with a simple flash of light and a brief energy signature. This looked like someone was tearing a hole in the universe itself. The distortion reached its peak, and then something impossible pushed through the tear in space-time. What emerged defied every law of physics and engineering that Minji had learned in her 15 years of military service. She had to blink several times to make sure her eyes weren't playing tricks on her. "Sweet mother of all that's holy," she whispered, gripping the arms of her captain's chair until her knuckles turned white. The vessel that materialized before the assembled fleet wasn't just large, it was incomprehensibly massive. Where Admiral Kale's flagship measured an impressive 3 kilometers from bow to stern, and the largest Brutarian dreadnoughts stretched to 5 kilometers, this human construct seemed to go on forever. Minji's tactical computer struggled to calculate its dimensions before finally displaying numbers that made no sense. 473 kilometers long, 112 kilometers wide, with a height that varied between 30 and 80 kilometers depending on which section you measured. "Captain, are you seeing this?" Communications officer Lee Soo-young's voice was barely above a whisper. My sensors are telling me that thing is bigger than some moons. It wasn't just a ship. It was a floating city, a mobile space station, a testament to engineering ambition that made the combined alien fleet look like children's toys floating in a bathtub. The hull gleamed with an impossible dark metal that seemed to absorb light, rather than reflect it, giving the massive vessel an almost predatory appearance. Thousands of windows dotted its surface like glowing eyes, and the ship bristled with weapon emplacements, docking bays and structures that defied identification. The communications array crackled to life with a voice that was surprisingly calm and pleasant, as if the speaker was discussing the weather rather than commanding what might be the largest spacecraft ever constructed. All vessels, this is Terra's Wrath requesting tactical coordination and fleet positioning updates. The voice belonged to Captain Song Hyunwoo, whose image appeared on every view screen in the fleet simultaneously. He looked impossibly young. For someone commanding such a massive vessel, probably in his early 30s, with kind eyes and a standard Earth Fleet uniform that looked exactly like the one Minji wore, just with different rank insignia. Admiral Kale's response was immediate and explosive. His four eyes were wide with shock and his mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. What in the name of the void is that thing? Human vessel, explain your construction immediately. Captain Song's smile was visible across the fleet, transmitted to every command bridge in the Armada. Our contribution to the war effort, Admiral. The Terra's Wrath is ready to begin combat operations whenever you give the word. Across the massive alien fleet, sensors that had been designed to analyze everything from quantum particles to dark matter were struggling to understand what they were looking at. Energy readings fluctuated wildly, jumping between scales that should have been impossible for any single vessel to generate. The ship's hull appeared to be constructed from materials that violated several fundamental laws of physics, including some that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had only theorized about. Impossible, breathed the crystalline hegemonies, representative over the fleet communications channel. Our quantum analyzers cannot determine the vessel's composition. The energy signature suggests power generation equivalent to a small star. Commander Nex of the Draconian fleet, usually quick with sarcastic comments, was completely silent as his ship's advanced targeting systems tried and failed to get a complete scan of the human vessel. My tactical computers are having system failures trying to process this data, he finally managed to say. Captain Yu Jinwoo aboard the Stellar Hawk was frantically running every scanning protocol his ship possessed. Lieutenant Kim, what are your readings showing? Sir, according to our sensors, that ship contains manufacturing facilities larger than most space stations, power plants that could supply energy to entire star systems, and weapon emplacements that our computers can't even classify. Subin's hands were shaking as she tried to make sense of the data flowing across her displays. Captain Song's voice cut through the chaos of communication channels with the same pleasant tone he'd maintained throughout the encounter. We take our commitment seriously, Admiral Kale. When Earth promises one ship, we deliver one ship. Shall we proceed with the mission briefing? The young captain's smile was genuinely friendly, but somehow it made every alien commander in the fleet feel like they'd been missing something very important about humanity's place in the galactic community. That was the moment when space began to darken around the edges of the system. Long-range sensors detected the approach of something that moved like a plague of metal locusts, consuming everything in its path. The void swarm had arrived, emerging from the dark spaces between stars like a mechanical cancer that spread across the cosmos, turning matter into more of itself with terrifying efficiency. The galaxy's greatest military armada was about to face its ultimate test, but now the equations had changed completely. The darkness at the edge of space suddenly exploded into motion as thousands of mechanical nightmares burst from the void, between stars. The void swarm hit the Allied fleet like a plague of hungry metal locusts, each individual unit roughly the size of a frigate, but moving with the coordinated precision of a hive mind. They didn't fly through space so much as they flowed like liquid metal, adapting their formations instantly to whatever resistance they encountered. Commander Park Minji watched in horror from the Bridge of Soul's Pride as the swarm entities revealed their true nature. Each mechanical creature was a twisted amalgamation of salvaged ship parts, organic components and technologies that defied classification. They moved with spider-like grace through the vacuum, their multiple appendages reaching out to grasp and tear at anything they encountered. "All weapons, open fire!" Admiral Kale's voice boomed across the fleet communications as the Zephyrian flagship unleashed its full arsenal. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids fired in coordinated volleys, while particle beam weapons that had never failed to destroy their targets lanced out toward the approaching swarm. The mechanical entities absorbed the impact of the first wave of weapons fire, their hulls glowing cherry red from the heat. But instead of being destroyed, they began to change. Their armor plating shifted and reconfigured itself, becoming reflective surfaces that bounced the next volley of plasma fire harmlessly into space. "Impossible!" Commander Nex screamed from his draconian dreadnought as his ship's primary weapons proved useless. "They're adapting in real time. My plasma cannons aren't even scratching them anymore." The swarm's response was swift and brutal. Hundreds of mechanical entities swarmed around 3 Zephyrian cruisers, their cutting appendages slicing through hull plating like it was paper. But they didn't just destroy the ships, they consumed them. The organic components of the swarm began breaking down the alien vessels at a molecular level, converting the raw materials into more swarm units right before everyone's eyes. "Sweet stars above," Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun whispered from his weapons, stationed aboard Seoul's Pride. "They're not just killing the ships, they're eating them and making more of themselves." Captain Yu Jinwoo's voice crackled over the communications array from the Stellar Hawk. "Admiral Kale, recommend immediate retreat. Our weapons are ineffective and they're multiplying faster than we can engage them." "All ships, retreat pattern Delta," Admiral Kale ordered, but the panic in his voice was obvious. "Fall back to defensive. Positions and regroup." The carefully organized alien fleet began dissolving into chaos as ships from dozens of species tried to implement retreat procedures they'd never practiced together. The Brutarian dreadnoughts, built for head-on combat, struggled to reverse course quickly enough. The ethereal phase ships flickered in and out of visible spectrum, but even their dimensional shifting couldn't completely avoid the swarm's grasping appendages. Commander Park Minji found herself in the worst possible position. Seoul's Pride had been assigned to the forward reconnaissance line, and now she was directly in the path of the advancing mechanical plague. Her small destroyer was fast, but not fast enough to outrun entities that seemed to bend the laws of physics. "Captain, we've got 12 swarm units closing on our position," Tactical Officer Lee Soo-young called out as her displays lit up with warning indicators. "They'll intercept us in 47 seconds. Minji's mind raced through her options. Seoul's Pride carried standard Earth Fleet weaponry, railguns, missile pods, and a single plasma cannon that was already proving useless against the adaptive swarm. She could try to ram through the swarm formation, but that would be suicide. She could attempt to hide behind the larger alien vessels, but that would mean abandoning her position and potentially leaving other ships exposed. "This is Seoul's Pride to Terra's Wrath," she transmitted on the emergency channel, her voice tight with desperation. "We need immediate assistance. 12 swarm units closing fast, and our weapons are ineffective." Captain Song Hyunwoo's voice came back instantly, as calm and pleasant as if he were discussing lunch plans. "Copy that, Captain Park. Beginning standard defensive protocols. Please maintain your current position." "Standard defensive protocols?" Minji stared at her communications display in disbelief. "We're about to be torn apart by mechanical spiders. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for the next 1,000 years. Terra's Wrath didn't just open fire, it rewrote the rules of space combat entirely. Beams of coherent energy that seemed to operate on principles beyond current physics swept through the swarm formations. These weren't plasma cannons or particle beams, they were weapons that appeared to unmake matter at the quantum level, causing swarm entities to simply cease existing rather than being destroyed in any conventional sense. But that was just the beginning. Reality-warping cannons created spatial distortions that folded space-time itself, causing entire sections of the swarm to disappear into dimensional pockets that might not even exist in the same universe. Defensive barriers appeared around Allied ships that operated completely outside known physics, turning aside attacks that had never been successfully blocked by any known technology. "By the void," Admiral Kale breathed, as his sensors registered weapon signatures that violated fundamental laws of physics. "Those energy readings are impossible. What kind of weapons are those?" Lieutenant Kim Do-hyun aboard Seoul's Pride was frantically trying to analyze the data his instruments were collecting. "Captain, that ship isn't just fighting the swarm, it's manufacturing new weapons while we watch. The weapon signatures are changing every few seconds. It's like they're inventing new types of destruction in real time." The most shocking moment came when the Void Swarm, which had never shown anything resembling emotion, fear, or tactical retreat in any recorded encounter, actually began pulling back from the human vessel. For the first time in galactic history, the mechanical plague that had consumed entire star systems appeared to be afraid. The battle that should have lasted hours and cost hundreds of ships was over in less than 10 minutes, leaving the Allied fleet staring in stunned silence at the human vessel that had just redefined what they thought they knew about warfare. The silence after the battle was more unsettling than the chaos that had preceded it. Where moments before space had been filled with the screams of dying ships and the mechanical chittering of the Void Swarm, now there was only the soft hum of life support systems and the distant pulse of stellar engines. The last mechanical entities had fled into dark space, leaving behind only twisted metal debris and the stunned remnants of what had been the galaxy's greatest military armada. Admiral Kale's voice cut through the quiet, transmitted simultaneously to every surviving vessel in the fleet. "All fleet commanders, immediate conference aboard the human vessel. We need answers, and we need them now." The gathering that followed would become legendary in galactic military history. Terra's Wrath's main conference room was so vast that it could have easily housed the entire combined alien fleet, with space left over for a small moon. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, supported by columns that looked like they had been carved from single pieces of dark metal. Holographic displays showed real-time data from across the galaxy, while the soft glow of unknown technologies cast dancing shadows on walls that seemed to extend beyond the horizon. Captain Song Hyun-woo sat at what appeared to be a simple metal table, looking completely ordinary despite commanding what was clearly the most powerful weapon in galactic history. He wore the same standard Earth Fleet uniform that Commander Park Min-ji recognized from her own service, with no elaborate decorations or ceremonial armor. Beside him stood Dr. Lee Sun-hee, a woman in her 40s whose calm demeanor suggested she was accustomed to explaining impossible things to confused audiences. But it was the third human who commanded the most attention. Admiral Choi Min-ho appeared to be in his 60s, with graying hair and the kind of quiet confidence that came from decades of making decisions that affected entire worlds. Despite his unremarkable appearance, something about his presence made even Admiral Kale's massive insectoid frame seem less intimidating. "Explain," Admiral Kale demanded, his 4 eyes fixed on the humans with a mixture of fear and newfound respect. "What we witness today defies every law of physics and military strategy known to galactic civilization." Captain Song reached for a ceramic teapot that looked like it might have come from someone's kitchen and poured himself a cup of what appeared to be ordinary tea. The casual gesture somehow made the situation even more surreal. "What would you like to know, Admiral?" The crystalline hegemony's representative, whose diamond-like form was still flickering with residual energy from the battle, chimed with harmonic frequencies that translated as pure bewilderment. "That ship, those weapons, the technology you displayed today should not exist. Our quantum analyzers registered energy signatures that violate fundamental universal constants." Dr. Lee Sun-hee stepped forward with the patient expression of a university professor addressing particularly slow students. "Terra's Wrath isn't just a ship, though I understand why you might think of it that way. It's actually humanity's entire military-industrial complex made mobile. We have manufacturing facilities aboard that can produce entire fleets on demand, research laboratories that develop and deploy new technologies during active combat, and the accumulated knowledge of a species that has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare." Commander Nex of the Draconian Fleet, still shaken from watching his supposedly invincible weapons prove useless against the swarm, leaned forward in his seat. Impossible. No single vessel could contain that level of industrial capacity, Admiral. Choi Minho spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, despite its gentle tone. When Earth joined the galactic community 50 years ago, we quickly realized we were behind everyone else technologically. Your species had mastered faster-than-light travel when we were still using chemical rockets. Your weapons could shatter moons while we were excited about nuclear fusion, so we did what humans have always done when faced with an impossible problem. We found a way to solve it. You built one ship, Admiral Kyle said slowly, as if testing the words. We built everything. We are, Captain Song corrected with that same gentle smile that had made alien commanders uncomfortable since his first transmission. Every human innovation, every military breakthrough, every industrial capability developed over 10 millennia of constant warfare, we compressed it all into a single vessel. The implications began to sink in across the assembled alien commanders. Captain Yu Jinwoo, who had been listening from his position near the back of the massive conference room, was the first to understand. You're saying that ship can manufacture weapons faster than enemies can adapt to them. Terra's Wrath can construct a fleet of 1,000 ships in 6 hours, Dr. Lee confirmed. It can research, develop, test, and deploy new weapon systems in real time during combat engagement. It can analyze enemy capabilities and design countermeasures while actively fighting. It doesn't just carry our military, it is our military, refined and concentrated into its most perfect form. Commander Park Minji, who had been quietly processing everything she'd witnessed, finally spoke up from her position at the table. So when Ambassador Lee Hana told the Galactic Council we were sending one ship, we were sending everything. Admiral Choi confirmed with a slight nod. One ship that contains the entire industrial and military capacity of our species. You see, other races wage war by building fleets, training armies, and deploying existing technologies in new combinations. Humans approach warfare differently. We don't just fight wars, we become war itself, adapting and evolving faster than any enemy can comprehend. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time, the assembled alien commanders understood why humanity had seemed so unconcerned about contributing only one vessel to the greatest military crisis in galactic history. They had assumed human arrogance or ignorance, when in fact they had been witnessing the ultimate expression of human military philosophy. General Vex of the Brutarian Empire, whose entire culture was built around the concept of overwhelming force, finally found his voice. The Void Swarm consumed the Andromedian fleet's 1,000 ships in 4 hours. You defeated them in 10 minutes. The swarm adapts to whatever it encounters, Captain Song explained, sipping his tea as if discussing the weather. But Terra's Wrath adapts faster. Every time they evolved to counter one of our weapons, we had already developed 3 new ones. Eventually, they calculated that continued engagement would result in their complete destruction, so they withdrew. Admiral Kale's mandibles clicked in what his species used to express deep thought. For the first time in recorded history, the Void Swarm retreated. They were afraid. Fear is a reasonable response when faced with an enemy that can out-evolve. You, Dr. Lee observed clinically. The swarm's survival algorithms determined that we represented an existential threat to their expansion. The meeting continued for hours, but the fundamental truth had been established. Humanity hadn't just joined the galactic community, they had quietly revolutionized the very concept of military power. The Galactic Council would never again make the mistake of underestimating the species that had compressed 10,000 years of warfare into a single impossible vessel. In the days that followed, Terra's Wrath would disappear back into the dark spaces between stars, returning to whatever secret facilities had created it. But the galaxy would never forget the day they learned that when humans promised one ship, they meant one ship that contained everything they had ever been or could become. The age of humanity had begun, and it would be measured not in fleets or armies, but in the quiet confidence of a species that had turned war itself into an art form. The end